again and welcome to Lifestyle Gardening. I'm Kim Todd and we have another great half hour of gardening tips to share with you. Today we'll be focusing on the garden as art. We've got features on using boulders to make an interesting retaining wall. We'll look back at the planning and installation of our pond in the courtyard of Keim Hall here on East Campus, and we'll take some time to help you understand seed packet instructions. Let's open today's show by taking a tour of a landscape here in Lincoln. The property is owned by a local artist and her husband, and you'll see plenty of things that we hope will inspire you to take a fresh look at what's possible in your own home garden. The home of Charles Wegner and Barbara Matley is the epitome of the garden as art and art in the garden. The house was designed to take advantage of the spectacular views of this beautiful space, which, like all gardens, is a work of art, progressing over time, changing with time, reflecting the lifestyle and the characteristics and the feelings of the owners themselves. It is the kind of oasis space where there is whimsy, beautiful plant materials that are used as pieces of art itself that is sculpted, and it's the kind of place where you really don't want to leave once you've entered the property. The intrigue of a garden is in the paths and the way they lead people into and through the spaces, and then what you might discover at the end, if indeed there even is an end. The journey is wonderful, and along the way you find all sorts of things in this garden that were created by Charles and Barbara working together. We have such interesting things as benches and bird baths and bits and pieces of sculpture that are leaf castings. Charles does these out of concrete, so the material is solid and strong, and the paint and the finish are delicate and beautiful. They will hold up forever, and there's something to be discovered along the way. There are succulents all over the garden. Some of them want to live here kind of during the winter. Many of them spend their afternoons and evenings in those long winter days in the sunshine in the house in the atrium or tucked into the garage. And then we find things along the way like chimney pots or large containers like this that have unusual annuals in them, tiny little fairy gardens with all sorts of bitsy little pieces of furniture, little tiny animals that just make it so much fun to visit this fabulous space. The garden was designed with a whole series of paths, and they're different materials and they lead to different places and spaces. Some of them end in sunshine where you can see through to the other side of the property. Others have an unusual plant, they have a piece of sculpture, they have something that you would normally think of as growing low to the ground, staked vertically into a canopy. So you get all of these great experiences, of course, in this wealth of plant material. Different textures, different colors, things that are evergreen, plants that are deciduous, plants that are going to change with the seasons. So as you walk through the garden, whether it is winter or spring, you get a totally different experience. People look at a garden like this and they think the management of it is just going to take forever and be overwhelming. But Charles and Barbara love it, and if you love it, you're going to take great care of it, and that is exactly what they do in this beautiful garden space. One of the things that really works so well in this garden space is how hard materials meet soft materials in really different combinations. Who would ever think to use monster big old boulders and then combine everything from rhubarb to dinosaur kale to a monster old banana with the fine texture of an evergreen on standard. So if you look at how this would change, or think about how this would change in the winter months, the banana disappears, the rhubarb goes to bed, the kale is maybe still there, depending on whether they have eaten it, and then the evergreens make it a little bit more of a quiet space. This is a great garden, the reflection of the people who live here and love this space and invite others to enjoy it as well. You can't ask for anything better than art meets the home, meets the people, meets the garden. The surroundings around your home really are a reflection of yourself. And there's really nothing wrong with a nice green lawn with a few shrubs and shade trees. But with a little creativity and imagination, you can create something that makes a bolder statement and brings out your inner artist. Nebraska is well known for being flat, but many homes have natural bumps and slopes that can create problems with runoff or are just too doggone hard to get a mower up and down. One good way of solving that problem is to build a retaining wall, either out of pre-constructed concrete blocks that you can get from your local big box store or something more natural like boulders. Here to tell us how to get the most out of a natural boulder wall is our graduate student Josh Resnicek.
Using boulders or large rocks in the landscape can be both aesthetically pleasing as well as beneficial for soil erosion and creating difference in grades and elevations in the landscape. We use these large rocks to create changes in elevation through either large steep slopes or even slow gradual slopes. There's two solutions to creating walls in your backyard or your landscape: use of large boulders or the segmented wall block that you see in a lot of places. There's two different installation patterns and techniques as well as different selection of block. The segmented block becomes a little bit easier because it's already cut, preset. A lot of them are interlocking, so it locks in it itself, and compared to boulders or larger rocks that have many different sizes, shapes, faces, cuts on them, making it a lot more difficult and a lot more time consumption in setting those larger walls. With selection of the larger rocks, you're going to be looking for different sizes and shapes, as well as colors even in the selection. With those different sizes and shapes, you're going to create a wall that's not as boring to look at aesthetically, as well as going to be a lot more difference in the lines, and you're not going to have lines throughout the wall that line up. It's going to be a lot more natural looking wall as well as aesthetically pleasing. When you start to stack these, a rule of thumb is to bury these rocks about 2/3 of their shape into the ground. When you do that, it becomes a little bit more natural looking. Not many rocks are just set right on top of the soil surface. So burying these rocks slightly into this ground, you make a more natural look. Starting from the bottom up, you're going to be starting with their bottom course, not in a directly straight line, but maybe patchworking here and there, so that way you don't create level lines all the way up your wall. You can do this by using different sizes of rocks as well as burying larger rocks at different depths. Once you get your bottom course set, it's kind of just a Lego game of trying to work your way up the hill, as well as making sure you don't have any solid lines or seams, so to say, through your wall. As the concept of right plant, right place, larger rocks and boulders have that concept that applies to them as well. Though segmented wall block can be a little bit easier to use and somewhat easier to set, the larger boulders and limestone have a more natural and a softer face to them.
Using these large and medium-sized rocks can create a much more natural look to your slopes. They have the added bonus of using the soil in the nooks and crannies to plant interesting plants. Of course, we want you to be safe when you're loading, unloading, and placing these large rocks. So unless you're Hercules, get some help, which will only make it easier when it comes to deciding how this rock puzzle fits together on your slopes. We thought we'd dig a little deeper into the landscape we showed you at the start of the program. The home of Barbara Matley and Charles Wegner didn't just spring up overnight, but it took years of planning, planting, trial, and error. We wanted to take a few minutes to talk to Charles to hear how it all came together. This is going to be an amazing experience because we are at the home of Charles Wegner and Barbara Matley, and this is not your regular just house in the middle of the city of Lincoln or anywhere else for that matter. This is a home that was built for the garden. It is a garden that is not only a piece of art itself, but it is filled with artwork. So Charles, tell us how this incredible property came to be.
Well, my wife and I had a vision of how we wanted to live. We like to live the artistic lifestyle, so we surround ourselves with lots of beautiful and unusual living plants.
If you had to tell your audience one thing about it that is really incredibly special, is it the partnership? Is it the people? How did you get this going from the standpoint of designing the house to match the garden?
Gladys Lux, who started the Wesleyan Arts department and taught at Wesleyan, lived across the street, and she had her studio on this property. She did some gardening along with some of her relatives, and so we feel like we're carrying on the tradition of the family, having kind of an urban farm here.
You've mentioned the history of the place and the space and how special it is to both of you. How does that figure into everything that you do here?
Well, we planned extensively and worked out many details. We wanted to have viewing points throughout the house to view the garden, and we specifically plant certain things to be viewed from each place. We just feel that having lots of living things around us enhances our life and that of others, and we welcome a lot of people in to see the garden.
And what happens with all these plants? This is only a 6-year-old landscape, which is just amazing. Many of these things don't want to live in Lincoln, Nebraska, and you mentioned earlier that you like to change them out.
We coax them along the best we can through the extreme times, and then we take a lot of plants in. We have storage areas and window areas. We've learned that some of the cactuses really enjoy a lot of sun in the wintertime, and then that helps them bloom during the summer. But we crowd everybody in with hopes of keeping them alive till next year.
Charles, talk about the partnership that you and Barbara have both in creating the garden itself and the art that enhances the garden.
Well, it's very good because we both have different talents. I have a lot of physicality that I can bring to the situation, so I can do some of the larger projects. Barbara is very in tune with doing some of the fine detail, so that combines very well, and we both enjoy it. We do things that don't always appeal to the other, but then it grows on you, and then you learn to enjoy it.
Charles and Barbara, this was absolutely a fabulous invitation. I will tell you that if you see a person kind of creeping around on occasion looking at things, that might be me.
You wouldn't be the first.
It's inspiring to see these beautiful landscapes. We realize that art is first and foremost a personal thing, a reflection of yourself and your choices of what you think is beautiful and worthwhile. Of course, it doesn't happen immediately, so it's going to take a little vision, planning, and patience. For more inspiration on this topic, you might want to check out our first season of Lifestyle Gardening, where we have several features devoted to art in the garden, as well as your garden as art. You can find those programs on our Backyard Farmer YouTube channel. About this time of the year, gardeners are starting to get itching to get back out into the soil. But this is Nebraska after all, and we're all going to have to wait a few more months. That doesn't mean you can't start planning what's going into the ground when things start warming up. For this week's landscape lesson, we're going to help you decipher what to look for on the back of your seed packets and in those catalogs. Gardeners love to start seeds inside. It gives us hope that spring is on its way. It lets us grow some plants that may not be available at the garden centers. The first way that you get your taste of spring is those catalogs start arriving in the mail, and then gardeners go ahead and order seeds. The seeds come in packets. The back of the packet is supposed to have all that great information about how you get those seeds to germinate, how you transplant, how you grow them on, maybe even when you harvest. One of the things to make sure that you do, though, is look at the catalog first, and a lot of the really good suppliers will give you a lot of information about whether you're going to be successful with those seeds. You'll see things like sowing and growing. You'll see days to germination, which is a really important thing. Part of the reason for that is we tend to get a little antsy. We sow those seeds, nothing comes out of the potting media or the seed starting media. We think maybe they've rotted. Or the catalog will say such things as you have to provide light for these seeds, don't cover them. You'll see what the preference for light is, the spacing of the plants once you get them outside, whether they are tolerant of sun or shade, whether they're good for cutting, whether they're great for pollinators. So catalogs themselves can have a lot of information in them. Then what you also then have to look for, and this is where it gets fun if you're going to a garden center and plucking them off the shelf, and a little more difficult if you're not for sure whether the company from which you're ordering the seed does this, is to look on the back of the package and make sure that on that packet the information you need about when and how to germinate those seeds, how long they're going to take to be able to come out of the ground and provide fruit or flowers, if they need any specific conditions such as bottom heat, which can be pretty important for some plants, if they need consistent moisture, if they need to dry out as they're germinating, how much light they need, whether you move them from light to dark, all sorts of different things, whether they transplant well, because we do have a lot of different seeds that if you disturb the roots when you are transplanting, chances are you're not going to have a great plant once you put it in the garden. So start by looking in the catalog, get as much information as you can, continue by looking at the back of the seed packet, have fun, enjoy, and we hope you get a great crop for the season. The easy way out of all that fun and hard work is to just head to the nursery or garden center and pick up the plants you need around planting time. But for a lot of our audience, starting plants indoors is part of the fun, and perhaps you just can't find what you're looking for at the store. So if you do plan on starting plants indoors, make sure you pay close attention to the germination times and the frost dates to have the best chance at success. Let's take a few minutes now to answer our viewer email. We'd love to hear from you, and perhaps you can share a picture or two with us as well. Just send us an email to byf@unl.edu. Our first question comes from eastern Nebraska, actually, and it's about goji berries. That is one of those new superfoods that has actually been around quite a while, but a lot of people in our part of the country have really not paid much attention to it yet. Goji berries are in the same family as peppers and tomatoes, so that gives you a little bit of a clue on the kinds of conditions they need. They actually grow as kind of this wild, viney looking thing that can get long, straggly canes that really should either be trained up into a big sort of an awkward shrub or pruned back. One of the reasons you want to take those tips off is because they do bloom on current year's wood, which means that you can do that pretty much any time right now until they begin to break dormancy, and that will cause laterals to form, and you're going to get a better fruit crop. In addition, you're also going to have a plant that is a bit more under control. We have actually installed a goji berry or two in our backyard farmer garden. This is the first season, but we noted pretty immediately that kind of a trellising up and some pruning is going to be to the advantage of us and to the plants. The goji berries themselves are a brilliant red. They're always hand-picked because they bruise and turn black and they lose their juice if you crush them or you're too hard on them. Most people actually consume them in sort of a dried form. They're beautiful on the shrub, however, so you can leave them be, which is what we did for this first season. We're really looking forward in the coming seasons to seeing exactly how ours performs. They are self-fruitful, so you actually don't need more than one plant to be able to get a decent crop. And ours are really in probably the ideal conditions. They're well drained. They have a bit of protection from the west, but they're in quite a bit of sun. The soil is really well drained. And there are actually some good cultivars on the market now, some good selections. You might see the Life Berry series. You can also plant goji berries from seed, and that would be a way for people who really they like to do that seeding, or they don't want to pay the price for a bigger plant. They just want to have a bit more fun with it. So take a look at that. We'll watch our goji berries during the rest of the season and hopefully be able to have some more advice for our viewers on those. The second question is one that occurs always in the winter, and typically it is either right after a snow or right before a snow or kind of all winter long, and that would be those wascally wabbits have really caused all sorts of damage to shrubs. This one actually comes from kind of the DeWitt area, and it is a couple of different plants. One is winged euonymus or burning bush. The viewer sent pictures that are the shrub itself, and you can see kind of the tips of the branches that have kind of an angle to them, and they're white. And then one of those stems, it's pretty obvious that the rabbit has gone in and actually sheared off the branches on that. And the other plant that they sent pictures of was aronia, which again is one of those superfoods. It's in the rose family. Rabbits absolutely love both euonymus and things in the rose family. And you'll notice that there still is quite a bit of growth left in both of these plants. Now, what will happen, or what you need to watch for as spring approaches, is you might want to go back in and cage the rest of that plant so the whole thing is not stripped of its bark, especially the euonymus, because that one's a little bit bigger and a little bit more perhaps in dire straits if too many rabbits come to visit for lunch. But the other thing you'll want to look at is where are the new buds on the remaining stems. Maybe clean up those cuts before spring arrives so that you don't have a shrub that is going to have one very long cane and 2 or 3 others that are kind of short and down in the crown of the plant. And again, Dennis would tell you that the best way to control rabbits is by exclusion. So if you have to put fences around all of those, especially new shrubs or even the big ones if we get really serious snows, that's really the best way to protect shrubs that are sort of prone to rabbit damage from that kind of damage. This is a viewer in York who sent us a picture of what he thinks is a grass or a grass-like plant that is in his landscape. It is a grass. It's a beautiful grass. It's called northern sea oats, and it falls onto our list of use at your own risk, because you can see the flat little seeds. Each one of those has the potential to germinate. They germinate very rapidly. They are capable of coming up in full shade, in full sun, in wet, in dry, in gravel, and they then become pretty difficult to control. So people who do have sea oats as an ornamental in their landscape oftentimes will go ahead and cut those seed heads just as they are beginning to turn tan in the fall, bring them in for winter arrangements, but not let them escape all over the landscape. You could also control them with a pre-emergence herbicide. It is a grass, so if you are using those herbicides in your landscape bed, that would be another option for you. For our final feature today, we're going to take a step back and look at our courtyard. It seems like just yesterday when we put that excavator bucket into the ground is the first step to what our courtyard has become today. What sprang up is a wonderful, relaxing area complete with a pond and a fantastic array of ornamental shrubs, grasses, trees, and flowers that everyone can enjoy and learn from. Imagine what can happen when you stand in a space that is filled with construction equipment, dirt piles, wet soil, a building that is actually under construction and major renovation, and think about what could be or what if. That's what happened with the Keim Hall courtyard after the building was constructed, allowing us the beauty of a new entrance, a great glass curtain wall, and the imagination of all those things the students, staff, and faculty came up with to be able to teach, to look at, and to enjoy. My landscape design students came up with the first very creative ideas, and then I took those and ran with them. This was a hole in the ground, a big old mud hole. We had to do a lot of sweat equity to be able to get the pond to what it is today. Actually, it only took us a single day to do the pond itself, but everything on the getting ready was really an interesting experience. The beauty of what we've done is that we've captured water off one of the storm drains. We recirculate so this pond runs year-round. We have this fabulous sound of the water on campus. We get dragonflies, we have birds' nests. Those birds come in, they take a little drink, they take a little bath. We have turtles, and we have fish, and we have the beautiful plants that we use in our teaching environment. So water always energizes a space, and particularly a space in a place like this, Where originally all we had was walls and a little bit of what passed for turf, instead we have a true wonderful, beautiful, living, growing, changeable environment with our pond in the courtyard. Keim Hall is a LEED certified building, and it was really important to us to be able to also use locally sourced materials or repurposed materials in building the courtyard. Students put in a lot of sweat equity on this one. In fact, 2 of them laid every single piece of pavement that you see, which again is either locally sourced or came off the building itself. We have bluestone off the old building, we have some of the granite, we have limestone, we have these monster big boulders that actually had to come in through a set of double doors in a big wheelbarrow with somebody standing guard so nobody would get killed in the process. But what we also have done in laying out the pavement and the paths the way you see them in here is let people take a little bit of a stroll. We have a flight of steps, we have a narrow sort of a sweeping path that goes all the way around. We have picnic tables and chairs so that people can either sit, stroll, enjoy the pond itself, take a look at the plants in this beautiful landscape space. As much as we love the pond, the crowning jewel in the courtyard's crown is really the plant materials. It's amazing what can happen in 5 short years if you just get them in the ground. Little bitty ones, some that were a little bit bigger. A lot of student labor went into this, and a lot of student labor still goes into it to take care of it and to certainly replace things as they die, add things as new plants come on the market. Turn this into truly a diverse, dynamic, beautiful space available to anybody who wants to see it 365 days a year, at least out the windows. And of course, when the building is open, you can trot right in, sit on the grass, sit on the walls. Don't feed the turtles. We feed them the things they should eat, but enjoy the plant materials as they change throughout the seasons, giving you something in flower, in foliage, in fruit, in all of the wondrous beauty of trees, shrubs, and perennials in Nebraska. What was once a forgotten eyesore is now a jewel on East Campus. It's also a great source of education, as our horticulture students not only can enjoy learning from it, but they can continue to help plan and plant wonderful plants for years to come. Our courtyard is open to the public, so if you'd like to stop by, take a look for yourself when the building is open. We've got one more lifestyle gardening program to share with you. Next time, we'll be focusing on pollinators and fruit trees. We hope you'll join us next weekend for our last show of 2016. Until then, good morning, good gardening, and we'll see you all next time on Lifestyle Gardening.